North Korea launched an intercontinental ballistic missile last week that flew higher and for longer than any other weapon tested by the regime. Now, this act of aggression comes amid much political uncertainty in the US, where a presidential election is underway, and even in neighboring Japan, where the ruling coalition just lost its parliamentary majority. We have more on this edition of Press Perspective. Hope your work week is off to a good start. It's Monday, November 4th here in South Korea. I'm Min Sunhee. We start Press Perspective this week by revisiting regional developments, including North Korea's latest Icbm test launch and Japan's political uncertainty. For this, I have Koichi Yonemura at the Mainichi in Tokyo. Koichi, it's good to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
I also have Professor Chung Ku-youn at Kangwon National University live on the line as well. Professor Chung, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Right, Koichi, let's begin with the analysis among pundits there in neighboring Japan about North Korea's most recent Icbm test launch. What are they saying?
Actually, there is not much difference between what South Korean experts say and Japanese experts say, but Japanese Ministry of Defense estimate that the missile has range of 15,000 kilometers, enough to potentially reach the U.S. East Coast. And some experts suggest that North Korea may have received technical support from Russia. Additionally, many experts believe North Korea will likely move toward developing multiple warheads after this one. And also the timing was, as you said, right before the upcoming US presidential election, and Kim Jong-un has reaffirmed his stance on strengthening nuclear capabilities, according to KCNA, indicated that a firm refusal to negotiate on denuclearization, regardless who becomes the new US president.
Right. Professor Chung, as Koichi mentioned, quite a number of pundits are actually touching upon the timing of this latest test launch of a missile by North Korea. What are your thoughts regarding the relevance of this particular time frame?
Well, actually, the timing of this launch was quite extraordinary, I think. There are several explanations, as reporter just mentions. While many people actually pointing out that the recent, actually tomorrow, U.S. presidential elections might be the reason why they actually make a provocation this time. To send a signal, and actually whether it is a Kamala Harris or a former President Donald Trump, to set the tone for the negotiations or dialogue for the next 4 years, which is plausible. And every time there is a new administration, North Korea used to actually make a provocation in the past. So it's kind of reasonable kind of explanation why they actually launch a missile this time. But at the same time, we have to look at this incident from the context of Ukraine and Russia war. They just sent military forces to Russia, and actually they are just about to be deployed in the territory close to Ukraine, and at the same time they are exercised together with the Russian forces. So this is quite a vulnerable situation for North Korea. Not only they have sent in munition and other logistic support to Russia, but at the same time they have sent thousands of North Korea military forces, which might send a signal the vulnerability of the North Korea on the peninsula, which actually in return make those North Korean people feel agitated or nervous, which is why they actually launch another missile test, so that they can mobilize their people behind Kim Jong-un's control. So that's another explanation we can presume. But either way, I think the current situation is pretty precarious, either for South Korea or the regional countries in the Northeast Asia.
Right. And following this latest missile test launch, Koichi, Japan has also reiterated the risks of a seventh nuclear test by Pyongyang. What are the prospects of such a provocation, Koichi?
My understanding is that the South Korean Ministry of Defense most recently pointed out the likelihood of nuclear tests, and actually we report about that, quoting South Korean Ministry of Defense. And after we report about the test, and after being asked about it, Japan Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshimasa Hayashi reaffirmed the possibility of the test. And as all we know, since spring 2022, there have been many reports of tunnel repairs and new construction at the Punggye-ri nuclear test site. And many Japanese experts predict that North Korea will eventually conduct tests aimed at miniaturizing and lightening nuclear warheads.
Right. Professor Chung, you mentioned Kim Jong-un sending his soldiers, of course, to Russia, which has been a major concern among members of the international community. That being said, what do you suppose does Kim Jong-un have to gain by sacrificing the lives of his soldiers?
For me, actually, Kim Jong-un actually staked all of his fate of his regimes on this deployment. He has to actually gain what the most of he can gain from Russia at this point. Not only he sent his people to Ukraine to fight against Ukraine, actually, which is not just Ukraine, but also number of NATO countries' military forces. But at the same time, Kim Jong-un actually, by sending military forces to Ukraine, he made a change in terms of alignment with China. China wants to stabilize the situation in Northeast Asia, given that there is an increase in U.S. forces in Northeast Asia as well. But North Korea's recent move to send the military forces to Russia, which actually changed the entire security landscape in the East Asia as well as European continent, which could be a pretty burden for the China as well. And at the same time, North Korea violated a number of international law as well. So not just for the people it has sent to Ukraine, Kim Jong-un actually staked all of his kind of regime's fate to this deployment. So in return, I think he has to receive, he wants to pursue this technology. He can complete the Icbm missiles or kind of multiple reentry missile, as the reporter just said, or other miniaturized nuclear warhead technology, which can complete the deterrence capability of North Korea's nuclear architectures against United States and regional allies. So other than that, there can be no explanations why actually he staked all his this risk against this situation.
Right then, Koichi, North Korea's latest displays of defiance comes amid a bit of political uncertainty in neighboring Japan. That being said, do tell us why Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba called for a snap election, and what now are the repercussions of the results of that election for him and his party?
Since the term of the House of Representatives, lower house, is 4 years, a general election must be held by fall 2025. So typically, Prime Minister's approval rating is highest right after taking office, which likely led Ishiba to call an immediate general election this time. And in fact, the previous Prime Minister Kishida, who took office in September 2021, dissolved the lower house the following month and secured a majority. But this time, however, the ruling Liberal Democratic Party, LDP, and Komeito parties suffered substantial seat losses and ending up with just only 215 seats out of 465. So this is well below the 233 seats needed to be a majority, even with their coalition partner, Komeito party.
Right, which is why a number of media outlets have been calling the result a shocking one. That being said, then, Koichi, what does the result of this latest election tell us about the current public sentiment in Japan?
Well, thank you for the interest on Japanese politics. And, you know, normally Japanese politics is boring compared to South Korean or US politics, but this time we had some bit of change. And the LDP ruling party has held power for most of the time since 1955, except when they lost power in 1993 and again in 2009. So there is no scientific evidence, but from experience, it seems that Japanese voters start to grow dissatisfied with LDP roughly every 15 to 16 years. And a recent financial scandal within the LDP may have also swayed public opinion, although the LDP had weathered scandals in the past and still won elections. So this year's results suggest that Japanese voters felt it was time for change.
Right. Koichi, an article by the New York Times claims voter discontent regarding, and I quote, wages, labor shortages, and an aging population are to blame for the latest election result. What are your thoughts?
That's generally correct, but let me explain more precisely. While the aging population, it's a big problem, but it's a long-term issue. And I think inflation likely had a more direct impact on the recent election. For instance, the price of a 5-kilogram bag of rice has risen from $15 last year to $25 this year. On top of that, bankruptcy among small and medium-sized businesses are on the rise, likely because of both higher prices and labor shortage. So these economic pressures may have intensified public dissatisfaction towards a Liberal Democratic Party.
Right. Professor Chung, what do you believe are the broader implications of this political uncertainty in Japan on regional stability? I mean, some pundits have raised the possibility of provocations, further provocation that is by North Korea, as well as even neighboring China.
Well, when it comes to regional stability, I don't think leadership change in Japan actually affected the potential provocation of North Korea or China. They have their own strategic interests in the regions, and China used to kind of expand their kind of spheres of influence in Northeast Asian region. So if there's a more moderate or kind of more accommodating Japanese leadership is held, that might be possible. There might be more diplomacy, but that does not really change the calculation of Chinese governments in expanding their influence in Northeast Asia. And also North Korea's provocation is mainly targeted at South Korea or United States. So changing leadership in Japan doesn't really kind of increase the probability of provocation from North Korea as well. But the thing is, if there is a changing of leadership in Japan, the trilateral cooperation with the United States and South Korea or bilateral relationship with South Korea might be affected. Especially more so, we has been very kind of facilitating very nice cooperative kind of initiative for the last several years, but there might be less of kind of considerations about kind of history issue or kind of forced labor issue, and their accommodation of this issue might be lowered in the future. So that, in that sense, there might be some kind of consideration you might think about if there is a changing of leadership in Japan.
Actually, Professor Chung, that was precisely my next question. I was going to ask you about how Seoul and Tokyo have been on a very productive path in recent times. Now, you have said that there is a possibility of a shift in trend under a different Japanese leadership. That being said then, Professor Chung, and I'm going to give you an impromptu question now, how should the government here, the Yoon administration, seek to deal with a potential shift in leadership in neighboring Japan?
Well, I think it is important to kind of distinguish strategic considerations and understand how important it is to have a strategic cooperation with Japan in the first place. And of course, kind of history issue and the labor issue is very important. We have to work on that at the same time. But at the same time, that should not stop kind of working on this strategic kind of task. When it comes to military kind of joint exercises or cooperation on the emerging technology or AI or maritime security issues, all of this issue has been very fastly developed for the last several years, and even between two countries and the trilateral format as well. And that things does not have to go away. And I think the Yoon administration understands this logic, and Japan, of course, understands this logic. So focus on what we can do at this very precarious moments so that we can kind of resist the kind of represents countries, kind of provocation in the regions, and kind of sustain the rules-based orders.
Right, of course. Koichi, naturally, it's the priority of any government to deal with the domestic matters at home affecting its people. But do you suppose that the Japanese government's preoccupation with domestic matters may somehow hinder a proactive stance on global challenges, including the wars in Ukraine and over in the Middle East?
Since there's not a big divide between the ruling and opposition parties on foreign policy or national security issue, so the fundamental direction will probably remain the same, no matter who becomes prime minister. But Prime Minister Ishiba faces another challenge, the upper house election coming up next July, which is critical for the Liberal Democratic Party to survive. So some within the party believe it would be wise to replace an unpopular prime minister before then. Prime Minister Ishiba's approval rate is, at first, at the beginning, he got 50%, but now his approval rating is like 35, 34%. So there is a criticism among LGBT party members. And given Ishiba's shaky position as such, he may struggle to prioritize international issue for now. So after the upper house election, and if the coalition stabilizes, then the government could focus more on foreign policy and security issues.
Right. And with regard to bilateral ties, Koichi, then, South Korea and Japan stand together, of course, in terms of addressing North Korea's acts of aggression. The two countries also face a number of similar social challenges, such as a rapidly aging society, as well as the unfortunate phenomenon of social withdrawal by their youth. Do you suppose joint efforts on social challenges between South Korea and Japan may serve to strengthen their bilateral ties?
Yes, I think so. Especially younger generation have, they have a similar point of view about society. And as you said, we have many common problems, like including aging population. So we need to tackle these problems together.
Right.
And I think it's possible.
Right. Hopefully you're right, Koichi. All right. Thank you so much for your time and your thoughts, Koichi. And Professor Chung, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Well, that brings us to the end of this edition of Press Perspective. We return same time tomorrow with a look at the impact of the U.S. election on Asia.